Imagine yourself 5 years in the future, really embodying the expression, the reflection of your core desires. Who do you want to be? How do you want to feel? What do you want to be contributing to the world? What kind of communities do you want to be a part of? Kind of describe that for me, paint a picture for me. How would that allow you to feel fulfilled in your world, in your life? And as they describe that, as they feel that level of excitement, I'm like, ooh, beautiful, cool. Like that is soulful abundance.
Put up your mask, let down your guard, and let's talk about the real real. This is the Bring Your Own Mask podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the BYOM podcast. I'm so excited for today's guest. My guest today is Elyse Preston, and she is an abundance coach, a human design guide, and she's actually based in Baltimore, Maryland. So she supports visionary change makers to experience more energetic well-being so that they can really increase their self-understanding and social impact. So Elyse, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. Oh my goodness. So one of my very first questions I wanted to ask you is essentially, what to you is soulful abundance?
Yes. So this is something that I've been having so much fun just diving really deeply into over the last few months. And it was amazing to actually have the opportunity to jam out and connect with you around Soulful Abundance for the recent festival that I just hosted. And so to me, Soulful Abundance is really all about rooting into the truth that we already contain everything that we need in order to have the most abundant, nourishing, supportive, expansive life possible. And for us to be able to really sink more deeply into that truth, it's not about chasing outside expectations or orienting our lives towards what others may be prioritizing. It's all about really dropping in and tuning in and listening more deeply and intimately to our own soul to be the guide for our life and our way forward.
I love that definition so much because I feel like up until now, I mean, obviously people are becoming more awake and we're really shifting consciousness right now, but leading us up until now, it's been a lot of misconception around the word abundance. So I feel like a lot of times when we think about abundance, we think about material things. What's your idea around that?
Yes. And so I think that abundance can be connected to material things, can be connected to wealth and accumulating resources. But I think that that's just an incomplete definition of abundance. It's an incomplete picture. And actually, in some of the conversations that I've been having with folks recently, I've been just really excited about cracking this conversation around abundance wide open and creating a bit of distinction and just like differentiation between material abundance and soulful abundance. Because you can be materially abundant in terms of having the car that you want or the house that you want, having plenty of money in your bank account, and still feel unfulfilled, feel unsatisfied, feel as though you are not abundant in terms of well-being. And so I really love emphasizing this concept of soulful abundance because the philosophy behind this, the foundation upon which soulful abundance rests, is that this flavor, this style of abundance is completely predicated on connecting to the essences of the things that allow you to feel the most lit up, the most inspired, the most alive, the most fulfilled from a soul level. And so just in the ways in which I work with folks in my community and the ways in which I really love to speak about abundance and connect with folks around this concept, I encourage them to understand that material things and money can be a component of abundance, but that it can be so much bigger and more expansive than that.
I love that so much. I mean, it's so true, right? There is really a fine difference between material abundance and soulful abundance. And it's really not talked about a lot because when you think about manifestation, a lot of people want to manifest material things in their lives, right? Yes. So sometimes we forget that that missing link is that, yes, material things can bring happiness, but when you're just sitting in so much material abundance and you're not feeling fulfilled with your life, then that aspect is missing. And so
Yes.
I really cannot wait to dive even deeper with you on this conversation
Mhm.
around these two essentially words, right? So why don't we put down our guards, put up our mask, and let's dive into the real real.
Right.
So what kind of mask do you have on today? What are you putting on?
Yeah. I think I actually got this from Mary Kay. It's a deep cleansing charcoal mask.
Okay. My mom used to be a Mary Kay rep, so I'm very familiar with that makeup
Right.
line. And I didn't know that they had masks. So that's really awesome that they're evolving because back then, I think it was just makeup. So it's really
Mm.
cool.
Yeah, this one is my favorite. Ugh, every time I take it off, I feel brand new, like so fresh.
I love it. So, Elyse, I'm just dying to know, how did you get into Soulful Abundance? How did you get into this work?
Yes. So it's kind of been an outgrowth of me learning more about my own unique soul gifts and my own design. Because I guess we're backing up a little bit more. I actually started my career in the nonprofit and youth development sector. And so spent about 5 years working in that world and just experienced a lot of burnout, a lot of stress and overwhelm working in direct service. And so that was how I started my journey of just kind of exploring how to take better care of myself, how to be able to provide also like some resources for my community members around navigating stress and overwhelm and burnout. So started off actually in the yoga and mindfulness space.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of my entry point to entrepreneurship was offering community yoga sessions, offering self-care and healing sessions for my community members, and was getting a lot of great feedback from people about how it was serving them and wanted to figure out how to make that jump from a side hustle that was providing me with a little bit of extra income, like how to actually translate that into a business and how to translate that into full-time work. And that's what led me to a spiritual entrepreneurship, like coaching community, and what led me to diving deeper into astrology, human design, and both of those modalities like just cracked open so much for me. And in terms of understanding myself, but in terms of finding the ways that I was actually able to be a really powerful guide for others around using those modalities to understand themselves so much more deeply and be able to have more energetic well-being in their own lives. And so part of the aspects of my own design that come up so consistently that for me as a being, my soul is really here to support myself and others with having unconditional trust in the universe and support others with leaning into the infinite abundance that exists within us and around us. And so as I started to lean into that more as a part of my design and who I'm here to be, that's when this concept of soulful abundance really dropped in for me. And I was like, oh, okay, this is something that I can really speak about and teach about and offer and share in a way that feels true for me and can also really support others.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about your nonprofit background because just like you, I wasn't in nonprofit, I was a Peace Corps volunteer, but I definitely feel like it's very similar where it's a lot of work, it's a lot of grassroots work, and it's just a lot of helping people where you feel like you really want to help at the same time you're burning out. And I feel like we can relate in that aspect. And I wanted to talk to you about this because I have been struggling and I really would like your input on this, on how to help people that, let's say, come from impoverished situations or situations where they feel like they're a minority. You know, we're both women of color. So how do you, I guess, explain to people that are struggling with understanding money mindset and abundance when they're grown up in that type of environment?
Yes. So I think there's a really powerful and personalized way that we get to support people in addressing the lived reality, the lived life experience that people have with the oppressive systems that we currently are living under.
Yeah.
And, acknowledging that, validating that, and also creating the space for people to be able to see beyond that and also see and validate and honor themselves as like the powerful creators of their own lives. And so just acknowledging that it's definitely not like a flip of the switch, an
Right.
overnight kind of process. It definitely takes time and deconditioning and loving accountability and space holding and tending to the parts that have been so incredibly impacted and traumatized and kept small by the really real systems
Right.
that are out here creating just completely unequal conditions under which we live. Like that is also so real.
Mm,
And I think it's also about acknowledging the realness, the reality also
mm,
of the abundance of the universe that we live within and our own creative capacity and
yeah.
ability as divine beings to be able to access that and to tap into that. And knowing that no matter your background or your experience, you still have the ability to tap into that, to access that.
I love that you say that because it reminds me of what I just did recently, which is I went to an energy worker. And one of the things that she taught me was to acknowledge the pain and accept the pain before we actually try to decondition it or try to work with it later, like in different
Right.
steps. So our first session was literally just acknowledgement and acceptance. And I love that you say that because I feel like a lot of people that are into manifestation or new to manifestation or even new to money mindset and all of this spiritual work, they're looking for something to help them, right? To fix them. And what
Mm,
they're not realizing sometimes is that you do have to acknowledge the pain, the trauma, your ancestors, the things that they've been through. So I
right.
love that you mentioned that. So would you share with us very briefly, right? Like if you were to work with
Yeah.
someone that, let's say, did go through so much trauma, like what are some steps
Mm.
that you would lead them through?
Yes. Well, I think for all of us, deeply craving in our lives is that feeling of being seen and heard and acknowledged and understood. And so, with any of my clients, I think particularly for folks who have experienced trauma, being able to create that level of safety so
Yeah.
that people can start to open, start to believe in possibility beyond maybe what they've seen in their own lived experience and create the space within themselves to see things differently, to approach things differently, to maybe start having different internal conversations with themselves. That really feels like the very first step because when we do experience trauma, our nervous system, our body contracts to keep us safe, to protect us. And so there's a level of tending and care and love that needs to be offered for us to be able to soften and open and feel safe to expand and do things differently and approach the world in unknown ways.
Yeah. And then how would you explain material abundance and soulful abundance to, let's say, someone that is completely new to this work, right? And they're wanting abundance. Like, let's just say that
Yeah.
on a material level, they're not abundant. They don't feel abundant, but at the same
Mhm.
time, their soul is also not abundant. So, how would you lead someone through understanding these two concepts?
Right. And this is actually a space that's totally a growth edge for me because I always want to be using the language that's like flowery and mystical and magical and spiritual and talking about the soul, right? And for a lot of people, that's new and that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel grounded in what people know. And so it's definitely been a practice for me over the last year since really weaving in, because even weaving in soulful abundance to my messaging and my marketing is new. Like in the past, I wasn't fully using that as the entryway into what I was sharing. But I think that I would invite people into a conversation about their core desires and maybe like being able to use that as the entry point for people who are maybe brand new to this concept of material abundance versus soulful abundance
Yeah.
and being able to create a little bit of a visualization to say imagine yourself 5 years in the future
Hmm.
really embodying the expression, the reflection of your core desires. Like, who do you want to be? How do you want to feel? What do you want to be contributing to the world? What kind of communities do you want to be a part of? Kind of describe that for me, paint a picture for me. And how would that allow you to feel fulfilled in your world, in your life? And as they describe that, as they feel that level of excitement, I'm like, ooh, beautiful, cool. Like that is soulful abundance. As you describe that level of living from your core desires, allowing your powerful essence to be like expressed through the world, feeling fulfilled, that is soulful abundance.
Mm.
And that feels different, right? Like feel how you feel in your body when you're in that visualization versus just saying, I won the lottery and now I have $32 million. dollars. Just more of a shallow material gain, right? And those things can feel different to you as a way to start to be introduced to those concepts.
Yeah. So what it sounds like is that tapping into that feeling vibration is where we need to be, especially with people
Yeah.
that have never, ever even know what it's like. I mean, one of my very first questions when I first started off in this space was, I mean, how do I even feel that if I have never even been there yet? Right.
Sure.
So I'm sure a lot of people are immediately asking that question in their heads while they're listening to you. So what can you say to that?
Yes. And I think this is actually so common. Like for anyone who might be listening to this podcast saying, I don't know what my core desires are. I don't know who I want to be and how I want to feel. Just wanting to let you know that like that is okay, that you're not doing anything wrong. So much of the ways that we've been conditioned, so many of the ways that we were taught to operate in school and from our families and from society never really encouraged us to do any of that internal reflection or gave us any tools or resources to be able to tap into that space. And so just knowing wherever you are in this process is beautiful and is more than okay. And if you're feeling called to this concept of soulful abundance, if this feels like something that feels exciting and nourishing for you, then you can dive deeper into it and you can start today and allow your soul to be the guide for how you move forward around this. And so I really like to encourage folks to be able to develop their own personalized relationship with self care, with just listening into their own internal guidance, their intuition, trusting themselves. Because something that I actually experienced when I was first starting out in my wellness journey, when I was diving into my yoga teacher certification, was I just had this perception that it was really important for me to become like this spiritually perfect person and do all of the things and wake up super early and only eat these kinds of foods and listen to these kinds of podcasts and just I ended up becoming burnt out on self-care and overindulging in ways that actually didn't really resonate with me, but I was just listening to what other people were doing and thought that that was the right thing to do and the right way to be. And so as you're exploring your own definition of soulful abundance, your own connection with your soul, your connection with your intuition, I would highly, highly encourage people to start slow, to begin making micro adjustments and micro movements to incorporate new conscious ways of being into your life in ways that feel really approachable and really fun and sustainable for you. And
Yeah.
so just thinking about the things that do bring you joy, thinking about the things that allow you to feel a sense of connectivity and lightness
Yeah.
after you walk away from them, thinking about the things that you could just stay up all night geeking out and studying, or the things that you love to have deep conversations with your friends around, and allowing those to really be the spiritual breadcrumbs that help you to connect the dots around what your soul is like leading you towards and guiding you towards.
Yeah. So it's so amazing because I feel like people that are listening on this podcast are going to feel this new idea around material abundance compared to soulful abundance. And I think that you said that so beautifully, comparing the two, because again, there is a difference, right? Like sometimes when people think about abundance, they don't realize that there are these two different types of abundance. And maybe there's even more that we don't know about. And it's really important for us to distinguish from the both, right? And kind of understanding where we're feeling when it comes to both areas of abundance. You mentioned something about being approachable on your journey, meaning like having an approachable step to something. I'm curious, when you first started this journey of yours, right, before you decided to go into soulful abundance and helping people in that area, what was an approachable step for you so that we can share with people listening that are very beginner thinking, okay, how can I even start to feel abundance if I've never felt that way before?
Right. Honestly, I would probably share more about the ways that I approach my self care now versus when I started my journey, because the way that I approach things or did approach things in the past is oftentimes from a space of like high achieving and perfectionism and like trying to get it right and overperforming. Right. And so at the beginning of my journey, I don't really think I approached it in an approachable way necessarily.
Okay.
I was like, I'm going in deep. I'm doing all the things. And yeah, as I shared, I kind of like burnt out on
Yeah.
wellness and self-care a little bit. And so I think the ways that I intentionally kind of just check in with myself now, and the ways that I allow my connection to my abundance and my connection to self-care to also be fluid and flexible and shift and change as I do, have made this journey feel more supportive and approachable and sustainable versus holding myself to very rigid structures or rigid accountability around my healing or around my journey. So, some of the things that do feel like they are a very consistent part of my life and a consistent part of my practices are having a consistent morning routine. And even in that, it's like very fluid in terms of the way that I approach it. For me, I just want to have at least 15 or 20 minutes where I can be completely just in my own aura, in my own energy, checking in with myself at the beginning of the day. And so some days I may feel like journaling, some days I may feel like stretching, some days I may feel like just making myself a smoothie and like lying on the floor and not doing anything, just staring at the ceiling. But it's like I have time. And if there are days where I wake up earlier and I can have a super like long and luxurious morning routine and it can be an hour and a half, I'll do it. But I don't feel like for me, for my life right now, that I am in a place where I'm like waking up at 6:30 every morning and can do an hour and a half routine every day. And that actually feels a little bit more rigid and feels like I'm putting pressure on myself to do something than actually allowing it to just feel good and feel free and feel nourishing. I also really love working with the cycles of the moon. And that's actually a big part of the ways that I do my intention setting and checking in around connection with everyday magic
Yeah.
and experience of my soulful abundance in my life. Being able to have that intentional time at the new moon to set intentions and allowing myself to really just breathe more possibility into my life and what I'm creating. And at the full moon, having that time and that space. And today is actually a full moon to be able to take note and pay attention to maybe what things are not feeling supportive and giving myself permission to like let go and shed and release things on a consistent basis.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned it's a full moon today because that actually kind of really segues into me saying, let's release our face masks and
Okay,
shed our face masks. Today's a
let's do
full moon
it.
in Aquarius, right? So
Yes.
I think this is just such perfect timing because right when you said that, I'm like, my mask is getting really dried up. It's time to
Mm,
take it off. And when I was describing the concept of putting up our mask and taking off our mask, it's really because I wanted my listeners
yeah.
to understand every expert that I bring on that when we fully release the mask that we have on and be vulnerable, we can be accepted for who we are. And in any case, we can also be more relatable, right? So that leads me
Mm.
to one of my next questions, which is what is one of the things that have stopped you on your journey to get to where you are today? And how has that like shaped you as the person you are today?
Yes. So, this question is something I've really been working with a lot because I feel like our clients and our community members are such beautiful, powerful mirrors and support systems for being able to reflect to us similar experiences and challenges that we have in our own life and in our own healing. And a few of the one on one clients that I've been working with over the past couple of months also like share this same core challenge that I have. And so working with them has also been helping me to do some of my own like internal healing around this wound.
What is it? I'm like,
Yes,
that,
like
no.
the great buildup. And so essentially for me, I have a deep belief that in order for me to belong, in order for me to be lovable, I actually need to dim my shine
Mm,
and make myself smaller. Because if I fully show up, if I fully shine, if I share my voice, my perspective, if I am just like radiating brightly, it's either going to like turn people off, it's too much. It's going to
mm,
like threaten or intimidate other people. It's going to make people want to like compete with me. So I've had certain experiences in my younger years where that was really activating for people. And I received that response. And so it made me want to be smaller. And that was a way that I was like keeping myself safe or avoiding controversy or able to just fit in or belong more easily. But
yeah.
now, at the point where I am in my business, that sneaky subconscious belief is actually really limiting
Yeah.
and preventing me from being able to fully be a stand for the things that I'm passionate about, fully show up in my brightest, most radiant, most authentic way, because
Mm,
that limiting belief is swimming in that says, "Oop, don't do all that, or you're not going to belong, you're not going to be lovable, people aren't going to be into it."
yeah.
And so just like dial it down a little bit.
Uh,
And, you know,
yeah. Sorry to
definitely,
interrupt you. I was just going to say that I resonate with that so much. And I just want to thank you and acknowledge you for being so vulnerable and sharing with all of us what your current limiting belief is. Because so many
yeah,
people that I interview, they tell me, oh, I just don't feel like I'm enough. And that's something that, obviously a lot of us feel that way, but yours is so specific. And I'm sure so many people literally feel the same way. And I've definitely have felt that. And I still feel that
yeah.
sometimes in certain projects or certain things I want to do, launching something, whatever the case may be. So I know obviously you're still continuing to work through this. What do you feel like has been helpful for you to get through this limiting belief?
Yes. So, I mean, two practices that I'm sinking more deeply into now are connecting with my body and connecting with my ancestors. And so it's actually kind of interesting, also reflecting back to my younger years, how this fear around like being too big and taking up a lot of space
Yeah.
also is connected to my experience with puberty and
Okay.
my body. And I just felt so uncomfortable in my body because I went through puberty really young. I had to start wearing a bra in third grade, and I got my period when I was in fifth grade. And I was just so big. I was so much taller than everyone because I had like fully gone through puberty and was like 5 foot something in like fifth grade. And
Uh-huh.
so I would do this thing where I would like hunch my shoulders and try to make myself look smaller, like next to other elementary schoolers around me. My mom used to call it my turtle shell. She'd be like, "Elyse, like, don't do your turtle shell today. Make sure you stand up." And I'm like, I don't want to, because then I'm just like so big and I'm out here. I don't belong in elementary school. Like, I just don't feel okay here. And so I do feel like some of that fear around like being big is very much an embodied thing too. It's like, okay, let me fully stand up, let me fully be here. And so a practice that I've really been enjoying is abhyanga, so like self massage, and just being able to, with each body part that I'm like using a really sweet body oil on myself, being able to also give love to that body part. Like, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much. Arms, I love you. Thighs, legs, feet, you're amazing. Thank you for carrying me through the world. Like, I'm so appreciative. I'm so grateful. Having some loving practices on the physical body.
Yeah.
But I also started working with a new coach who I love. Her name is Ash Johns. And she does work that's like at the intersection of ancestral healing and conscious business. So I've been just doing some work to connect with my ancestors. And there's some energy that's been carried through from
Mm,
my father's maternal line that's very much rooted in this energy of conformity and obedience.
okay.
And so I've been doing some ancestral healing around this as well, which is like shedding and letting go and releasing of some of the ways that I'm also carrying and holding that obedience or that smallness so that I can embody that
Wow.
authenticity more.
Okay, so you just said two things that were so life changing for me. And I think it'll be very life changing for people listening because you talked about two things that people can start working on right away. You
Mhm.
mentioned how you felt like you didn't belong because when you were younger, you went into puberty at a young age,
Yeah.
right? And that's so interesting because I feel like everyone's so different. Obviously, we all have different designs. You're an expert in human design. So it's like, that, right? So when I
Yeah.
was hearing your story, I was literally thinking about when I was younger, I didn't have that same thing that you went through when it came to my puberty. But what I did go through when I was a child was that I started door-to-door sales at a very young age. And then I was interested in sales and marketing. And then I remember my
Yeah.
dad saying, like, you can't sell to family, like you can't do it's like very shameful. And so I
Mm.
realized that we all have different journeys from our
Yeah.
childhood that we have carried on, and we have adopted this belief that we don't belong based off of
Mm.
our own individual experiences. And then on top
Yeah.
of that, you said that you went even deeper into ancestral healing, where you not only healed this lifetime, which is obviously what happened to you when you were a child, but then also what happened to your ancestors. And that's exactly what I really want people to understand, is that a lot of the
Mm.
time, our soulful abundance, whether we have it or not, or whether we're working on it or not, that trauma that we need to heal first comes from a very deep level. It's not just, it's past us, right?
Right.
And so I'm so glad that you said that, because it was such an aha moment for me. And I'm really glad that you were so vulnerable with us to share that. When it comes to your ancestral healing, right? When it comes to soulful abundance on an ancestral level, I know you're
Yeah.
still working on this, but do you have anything to say around that topic?
Yes. So this is definitely a new space for me to be diving into and feels really exciting because I'm honestly tapping into and just unlocking parts of my own intuition and spiritual gifts that I was completely unaware of just because I haven't really done this work before. But I do think that it is really important for folks to know that this journey is going to be so unique and personalized, and that it's hard for me to say or give guidance or advice of how one can or like should connect with their ancestors,
Mm,
because for me, I have been working with a coach that does work around guiding people through how to connect with their ancestors.
yeah.
And once we're in that space, inviting us to trust ourselves and explore how to deepen that connection and trust yourself around what's coming through. And so my own experience has been super sensory and embodied. And
Mm,
so when I'm connecting with my ancestors, I'm not actually really hearing anything or seeing anything. And so at first I was thinking, I was like, oh, am I doing something wrong? Like, am I blocked? Am I not connecting? But I'm from the coach that I was working with, was given like specific questions or prompts to ask. And when I've been asking questions or connecting, I receive really targeted specific tingles or sensations or messages like in specific parts of my body. And it's been really powerful to then do a little bit of exploring through different books and tools and modalities, and also like trusting my own knowing and intuition around what that means. So it's like
sure.
there was a lot that was coming up around my throat as I was asking certain questions, or there was a lot of like heat and sensation in my legs as I was like asking other questions. And so really feeling into like the messages that I'm receiving and what guidance to be taking based upon what I'm receiving. So I feel like it sounds very confusing. I described this in kind of like a strange way, but like for some folks, they're going to receive their guidance through actually claircognizance. Like there's going to be knowing that just drops in, and other people
Yeah.
might actually be seeing things as they're connecting with their ancestors. But like for me, it's very visceral. Is that the word? Yeah. And
Mhm,
physical, and like
mhm.
through my body that I'm
Yeah.
receiving different messages as I'm connecting. And so I would just encourage people to know that there's like not one right way, and that you get to go on your own like personalized journey. And a piece of guidance that was shared with me is that all of us are such deep spiritual intuitive beings, and our ancestors and like our spirit guides want to communicate with us in the ways that we can best receive our messages. And
Mhm.
so thinking about too for yourself, like what are some of your superpowers and what are the ways that you in the natural course of your life connect to your intuition, and your ancestors may likely be able to tap into that and like connect in with you in that way. And so for me, I have a lot of like embodied intuitive receptors all the time. That's something that I'm physically experiencing throughout my day-to-day life. And it's like, oh, my ancestors also are communicating with me through that channel too, which has been really fascinating.
Yeah, it is very fascinating, because I remember one of my friends who's a shaman was saying to me how our ancestors are not just the ancestors like our grandparents, right? But we have such a huge ancestral line. And before, our ancestors were like, let's say, living in different time periods, right? Based off of, for instance, right, there's the industrial age. There's so many different ages that we have gone through, but our very primal ancestors, our very first ones, are people that have used their intuition, are people that have used these spiritual tools that we're doing today. It's just that it has been lost, right, throughout time. And now we're kind of bringing that back. And now we're really tapping that back into that sense of awareness and sense of intuition. And I love that
Yes.
you explain that you feel it on a visceral level, because I personally don't feel it in a visceral level. I feel it, it's just kind of this deep inner knowing. And I think it's also because I'm a projector. It's just this feeling. I just know, and I just can't
Yep.
even explain it. And sometimes people are like, wait, but how do you know? I'm like, I just know, you know? And so people listening can be encouraged to know that, our path is so different. And there really is no, in a sense, right? Like step-by-step way that you need to go through your soulful abundance. And that's what I love about Elyse's work, is that she really guides her clients and teaches her community how to tap into what your soulful abundance means. So I'd love for you to actually talk about your own offerings. And now that your mask is off and you're fully here, you no longer do the turtle shell anymore.
Right.
Can you share with us, what are you excited about this year? What are you offering to the world?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for this invitation to share. And so I'm most excited to really be letting people know about the group coaching program that I have launching at the end of August. It's called the School of Soulful Abundance. And it's a 4-month journey for women who are really excited about connecting with their own unique definition of abundance, reclaiming their power, and starting their own soulful businesses. And it's going to be a pretty intimate container, about 12 to 15 women. You're going to be walked through 4 practice areas to support you with clarifying your vision, being able to connect in with your own confidence and continuous sustainable pleasure to support you along your journey, and also really blending the strategic and the intuitive, giving you some grounded, tangible practices and tools to apply to your life and business. So moving through those 4 practice areas of action, pleasure, community, and soul. And yes, that's going to be launching August 31st. And so if folks are interested in learning more, you can check that out at bemoreconnected.net to get all of the details and check out that application. And I also am still really excited about working with folks one-on-one. And so that's really the key way that I've been working with folks over the past few years, is through one-on-one mentorship, either in a 4-month or a 6-month container, to be able to guide folks along that journey of remembering their soul's purpose and mission, and cultivating the tools, the confidence that they need to be able to pursue it. And so I've at least found in my journey that entrepreneurship is such a spiritual journey. It really asks us to step into a way of living in the world that is extremely countercultural. You're your own boss, you're creating your own rules, you're the center of your brand. And so it asks for a level of authenticity and vulnerability that is so uncomfortable. And so in my own entrepreneurial journey, in my experience, one-on-one mentorship and also nourishing community and coaching groups and containers have been everything. Like, have been so incredibly healing and transformational along my path. And so I just feel so passionate and so grateful for the opportunity to also be able to support people in those ways.
I love that. So everyone listening, definitely check out Elyse. I'm going to put all the links in the description box below. Elyse, it has been such a pleasure. I loved talking to you about soulful abundance and really the difference also between material abundance and soulful abundance. And we talked about ancestors, and we talked about really how we can individually tap into soulful abundance. So thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we can talk about another topic next time.
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation, Kristen. This has been such a blast, and I look forward to staying connected with you and with your community.